welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to help trauma therapists be their incredible selves, to be human, to be real, not just a clinician. I'm a big believer in who we are is more important than what we know. And this requires cultivating authenticity, genuineness, and vulnerability, and that requires intention. You can learn more about my courses and workshops by going to thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. Let's get started. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. I am very excited to have as my guest today, Dr. Hillary McBride. Hillary, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this. Since our last conversation, I was ready. I was ready for the next one.
You are welcome. So Dr. McBride is a registered psychologist, researcher, and podcaster with expertise that includes working with trauma therapies, and embodiment at the intersection of spirituality and mental health. Her first book, Mothers, Daughters, and Body Image, Learn to Love Ourselves as We Are, was published in 2017. She was the senior editor of the textbook Embodiment in Eating Disorders, Theory, Research, Prevention, and Treatment, which was published in 2018. Her most recent book, The Wisdom of Your Body, Finding Wholeness, Healing, and Connection Through Embodied Living, came out in the fall of 2021. And her new book, which she's working on, gathering, is coming out in 2024, and it's called Practices for Embodied Living. Hillary, welcome back.
Thank you.
So let's want to start off here. Remind our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Yeah. So I grew up on Musqueam land in Vancouver, BC, and I currently live on the land of Lekwungen speaking people in Victoria, BC. So I've moved to an island just off the coast of Vancouver, it's an island is kind of deceptive because it's as long as the drive would take from Vancouver to California, but it is an island. So we got ocean all around, and that's important to me. So I'm in Victoria.
So talk to us about this. I mean, obviously, as I read your bio, this one word pops out, embodied.
Mm-hmm. We're paying attention. Way to go.
Why?
Yes. Why embodied? Okay. So I can hit that from a few different angles. One of the angles would be the body is where life happens, right? And I feel really drawn to, from a kind of existential, humanistic, spiritual perspective, this idea of what does it mean to be fully alive? What does it mean to be here, right? To be in the lives that we're living and to experience the richness and the fullness and the beauty of being here. And so I think that embodiment is really a call to be in our lives, to experience agency, fullness, presence, connection. But of course, the tension of this is that our bodies are also the place where it's really hard to be, right? It's where our trauma lives. It's where pain is, death, objectification, where we experience marginalization, I would say that the worst of being human and the worst of the human experiences we feel and live in our bodies. And so we've come to this experience through the history of, I would say, abstraction, through rationalism, the Enlightenment, through religion, through philosophy, through the history of how power is conferred, to be in a position where even though our bodies are where life is, we've somehow gotten the memo. We've had experiences that have made it feel very, very difficult to be in our bodies for many of us. So embodiment for me is really about a return to being who I think we could really be, both individually and as a species, and the process of healing that we need to go on along the way to restore this sense of fullness and aliveness that's available to us.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, on one hand, it's so inspiring to hear you say that. And also with that comes a caveat that there's a lot, it's like a journey. It's like a hero's journey to get to that point almost. When did this become prominent for you, pronounced for you?
Yes. Well, the reality is that I like to identify myself as having been a frequent flyer in eating disorder treatment. If there was a punch card, I would have my punch card of different treatments all punched out. And I had been given the narrative of the cognitive approach, the body image approach, don't trust yourself because you can't trust yourself, but you can trust us from the kind of the medical personnel approach. And I eventually met a therapist, and she really distanced herself from most of the things that we would consider evidence-based in eating disorder work. And instead, we focused on philosophy and consciousness raising and feminism and phenomenology. And it was like she allowed me to remember that there was more to me than the hierarchy of disembodiment that I'd been handed both by culture, but also by the medical professionals who were actually trying to help me. And I remember this one time in our clinical work, we had been doing therapy for a number of years at this point, and she was really kind of the last person I saw. I would call it the kind of the last ditch effort. I remember she asked me one time, "Do you notice how you're sitting in your chair? Do you notice how you are showing up here today?" And it was on the heels of me sharing something really like alive and connected. And I felt inspired and hopeful, and this really big thing. I'd taken this big risk in my life at that point. And it was the first moment where I remember actually realizing that I had a body, right? Like this was a significant moment in my life of going, I have a body and it's in the room and other people know it's here and it says something about me. It communicates something about my internal reality. And she was able to say, like, can I hold up for you next to this, by contrast, how you would sit in the chair when we first started working together. And that moment, the way I tell the story was that it was as if consciousness had been floating in my brain, in my head, and had been pinched at my neck, right? As if it was a balloon and I had been pinching the neck of the balloon and all the air had been stuck inside my head. And I opened my hands and all of the air, or my consciousness, started to flow through my body. And I remembered, I have hands. Oh my goodness, my leg is asleep. Oh, I don't know if this is really comfortable. How am I sitting? Like, right? There was this really experiential encounter with embodiment that came before I even understood what the word meant.
Wow.
And it was the sense of being a body existing in space and realizing that my body was seen and known by somebody else. And my body told the story of what it felt like to be me. So, I mean, I can say more about the kind of where it branched into the academic, but it was, for me, first experiential and a lived encounter with what it was like to be a body, not just a mind that was carried around by the flesh suit.
First of all, and this, I'm like saying to myself, this is why I freaking brought you back here, because you have just an incredibly beautiful and inspiring way of articulating this. You know, to hear you share that, it brings up this dichotomy or this polarity of what you were doing prior to this. I mean, it's, and help me here, but an eating disorder feels almost like the antithesis of that in a sense.
That's it.
Yeah. What was going on for you such that you needed to shun or block out the body?
Yeah. And I would actually go further than that. I would say I wasn't just trying to block out the body. I was actually trying to kill my body. I was trying to make my body disappear. Like, this was about complete body eradication, not just by living my day to day in my mind, but about actually trying to dry up any resources that my body needed to survive, such that it wouldn't be the obstacle that I thought it was. It wouldn't be the barrier to being me that I thought that I needed. And I can trace that back. The way that I narrate the story of tracing that back in terms of the functionality of the eating disorder and what I needed, the story has changed. The more I understand trauma, the more I understand affect regulation, the more I understand interpersonal neurobiology. Because for a while, I remember thinking, well, I didn't experience sexual abuse as a kid, and I wasn't ever body shamed by my peers. You know, some of the things that we think of as being these gateway experiences to disembodiment and eating disorders. But I was always a sensitive being, which means that everything that I felt like it was dialed up all the way 10 out of 10 in a way that I don't remember hearing my brother talk about and my friends didn't experience. And my mom tells this story of me as a kid, needing to have my bed sheets washed 3 times, once with soap and twice without, because if there was any soap residue on the bed sheets, I would get a rash all over my body. And it was like this kind of intensity that everything that I was encountering felt like it was too much for me to be in the world. And I remember for the most part that was held really well by the people around me. And I felt like that was never weaponized against me, or I was never pathologized for that. But there was a point at which it got even louder. And I remember happening around puberty, around my adolescence, when I started to find my voice. And it felt like not only was it loud inside of me, but I started to make it loud outside of me in a way that became too much for the people in my life. Specifically, the relationship I had with my mom really started to change as I started to speak up and use my voice. And her and I've done a lot of work around that in terms of what was getting stirred up for her in her own history. But I remember thinking, oh, here's the proof, right? My body is too much for me, but now my body is also too much for everyone around me. And my body is a threat. I'm experiencing sexual objectification. I'm experiencing this reality that my body's out of my control and it's changing the way people see me and I experience myself. And that feels terrifying. That feels out of control, like it's lacking agency. And what we understand, I mean, Neva Paran's scholarly work around this has been really impactful for me, but her assessment of the role of disembodiment and embodiment in the development of eating disorders is that eating disorders are about restricted agency. And they're about the subjugation of the body, that when our body is the only thing that we have to enact our sense of agency in the world, as humans, we are so adept at finding a way to survive that we will even turn against ourselves to feel like we have some way of gripping a sense of control, power, right? Agency. So I wish that it was more glamorous than that. But I think that reality is that I don't wish it was more glamorous. I wish that I had perhaps a more specific story that I could narrate in a way that it said, this specific thing happened. And then all of a sudden the eating disorder made all the pain go away. But I think it was the medicine that I needed to make feeling what it was like to be me go away. The eating disorder was the remedy, at least for a time, to help me tolerate that being me in the world felt like it was way too much for me and way too much for the people around me. And so I started really slowly to make my body disappear.
You mentioned a researcher who did a lot of work on.
Neva Paran, Niva Piran. Her work in the field of embodiment has been, revolutionary. She's been doing decades of research about what is embodiment, how it develops, what is disembodiment, how we understand embodiment and eating disorders in particular, and the kind of work that we need to do to help people experience in the safety of being in their body.
The story you shared with that therapist who sounds amazing, and that image of you recognizing or feeling yourself in that chair, in a sense, as that, how did that unfold to give you more energy and embodiment, or agency rather?
How did it unfold to have that experience, or what happened next in my embodiment journey?
Yeah.
Well, I did the totally sensical thing that everyone would recommend if you're a treatment resistant patient with a disordered eating presentation. Go to grad school, of course. Right. I was actually, it's kind of funny to think about it now because I would never recommend this for my patients, but I understand the utility of it for me in my life. But I was on the cusp of going into treatment again. I was set, my spot had come up in a residential program. And also I had been thinking, I'm feeling constrained by the identity of being in eating disorder treatment so fully that it feels like it's eclipsing my ability to remember any other dimension of myself. And so I had been starting to apply. I'd finished my undergrad at that point. I was starting to apply for graduate programs, thinking I kind of want to study a bit more research, I want to study research. I want to study psychology. I want to do a little bit more of that. And I had these two presentations in front of me at the same time. One was to go back into treatment and one was to do something totally different. And I felt like I'd exhausted all my options for treatment. I felt like I knew what I was going to get. I felt like I knew who I was going to have to be. I felt like I could do that. I could put the hat back on of performing the recovered person and kind of adhering to these, behavioral protocols that other people told me would make me feel better. And I felt like you might even call it like life energy or some sort of something inside of me said, do something different, right? You know how that's going to go. There's a chance that you could feel more alive if you take a risk and do something different. So I went back into grad school very much in my eating disorder recovery journey. And I started to ask the question, okay, if I'm going to research something, I want to research something that is close to me, which is the case for many of us. And I thought, if I was ever to have a daughter one day, I'd want to know that I could give her the best possible chance to stay connected to herself, to not have to leave her body to feel like she could broker connection in the world. So I started researching body image and particularly looking at positive body image as an inoculating factor against eating disorders. And what I found actually in the data is that positive body image is great, but it still has a kind of disembodying quality to it. That when we are considering ourselves to be an image, that we are not actually inhabiting ourselves in a sensory way. We are still leaving ourselves to hold an abstraction of our appearance. That yes, it's great if we evaluate our appearance positively. And if I can look at my body through the eyes of someone else or in the mirror and say, wow, I like how that looks. I mean, I don't think that hurts anybody, but there is still something that's missing in terms of the felt sensory experience of being human. And it was actually Neva Paran's work that redirected me to this idea of embodiment as inoculating against negative body image. It seems that when we stay connected to our experience of being human in a more textural, dynamic, lived, felt, sense, intuited way, that we attribute more of the resources of our identity to what it is like inside of us and less resources to how we experience or interpret our image, and then consequently how other people interpret our image. So there's something that really shifted for me in realizing, okay, I actually need to start feeling what it's like to be in my body. Right? I can't just keep thinking about trying to change how I think about how I look, right? That is so many layers removed from what it's like to actually be me, right? All of the layers of that. And so that felt like another big shift for me in terms of going, okay, I really got to get serious about why it's hard to feel into my body and what I'm going to do about that next.
Jesus. This word, how you described being embodied, for me, it's so, it's hard. It's challenging. I remember when I was in graduate school and people, through courses or feel your body and feel into you, like, what? Yeah. No, what does that mean? Give me a cookie. Why? Yeah. And when we talk about this within the context of our world at this point, as you, I think, said earlier on, touched upon her, it seems not only challenging, but almost it requires a certain selfishness, almost. It requires a certain tenacity. I think it requires focus. I mean, it's calling us back into ourselves. It's I've been going through not to shift this to me, but I've been going through my own healing thing, and just the whole healing process in and of itself, as we all know, is friggin' hard. And it's like we have to find what's going to work for us and reclaim our bodies. What is your response to that? What do you say?
Yeah. I think that, again, we come to disembodiment actually quite naturally in the culture that we live in and based on the lived experiences that we've had. Although I want to hold up embodiment as, in a way, a kind of picture of wholeness, of integration, of healing, the kind of ideal perspective and experience of being human, the reality is that we have inherited and we are constantly encountering experiences that both make it really difficult to be in our bodies and pull our attention away from our bodies. Like I'm just thinking about how early it starts in our attachment relationships, where often we have a felt bodily knowing inside that says something's not right. You know, an example that comes to mind is of a kid seeing their parent distressed and going, "Hey, Mom, are you angry?" Right? There's something in us that's actually wired to feel in our own body the distress of someone else's body. And our caregiver, perhaps not knowing how to regulate their own emotions or not having been told it's okay to feel or trying to protect the kid, says, "Oh, no, I'm not upset. No, that's fine. Nothing to see here." And we have these early experiences of going, "Oh, am I wrong or is she wrong?" Right? And I think that, you know, another example of that would be the early experiences that we have of being told, when you stay connected to your knowing, maybe about feeling, right? Feeling is a body process. I'm angry. This isn't fair. I don't like this. I'm sad. I'm lonely. I'm scared. What we're told is that that's not allowed to be there. Right? We are met socially, relationally, often with stories about how what we're sensing and experiencing inside is going to cost us both survival and connection and belonging and love and approval. And so I think we have very subtle early experiences that get woven into our relationship with our body that we carry around, where we often are in an unconscious way faced with this tension of, I either stay connected to me or I stay connected to you, but I can't do both. And we could extrapolate the you to be, you know, you, another person, you, a caregiver, but also you, society, you, culture, you, right? Maybe even big picture, transpersonal, God, right? Maybe in some religious context, we've heard if I'm connected to my body, I do bad things, and therefore I'm not loved by God, or I'm going to experience shame or judgment from my religious community. So I think that many of us find it really, really hard to be in our bodies because we end up bumping up against the old wiring. And I would say the biopsychosocial loops that we inherit that say the cost of being connected to our body is actually going to be so much greater than whatever we could gain by staying connected. And so we put labels on it, right? It's like, it's a waste of time. It's selfish. It's dangerous. And the truth is that because, and I think of, so much of the framework that I've inherited from the scholars who've done this work, but mind and body are a constantly dynamic process, right? That are also relational. Mind, body, and relationship is what it means to be the self, essentially, when all of those are flowing within and between each other, that it's really, really hard to actually stay connected to what it's like to be me without also having the social resource to reinforce that that's a safe and okay thing to do. So I think I just want to paint a picture of complexity so that none of us walk away from this conversation feeling shame of like, why is it, is it bad that I'm not connected to my body? And I want to say, of course you're not connected.
Hell no.
Right? Like, what chance did you have?
Right.
Given, like, when you look at trauma makes it feel so terrible to be in our bodies because of the loudness and the intensity of the terror and the panic and the overwhelm. So no wonder, or like, the aloneness or the disconnection. No wonder we didn't really have a chance, did we?
And yet, when we're on the healing journey, we're called back to the body.
Yeah, in a way, it's the only way, right?
Pulled back.
Well, I have a friend, Jamie, she's a poet, and she always says, a loud body is a kind body, right?
A loud body is a kind body.
Yeah, this idea that we've misconstrued the loudness of our body as a violation of the goodness of life. And actually the loudness of our body is our body saying, listen, something is not right. Something needs attention, right? And I think of the Leonard Cohen line, like the crack is where the light gets in. it's when we have these experiences of intensity that we then use and misconstrue as proof that our body is bad, right? We scapegoat our body. Actually, what that might be is our body saying, like, listen, there is something here that is asking to be healed. And if you actually only go into it more, you'll find that there is something waiting to be integrated on the other side. But it takes social connection, courage, and I think sometimes like bold-faced trust and faith to say, if I go towards what I've felt hurt by or what holds the hurt, that I'm not going to get hurt more. It's brave to be in the body when the body holds so much information about how scary it is to be alive. And yet again, as you're saying, we do that because there's something on the other side. When I can feel the intensity of the terror, then I also get the beauty and the fullness of the joy. And when I know how to tolerate the things that are hard to tolerate, I don't have to keep making decisions in my life based on what I'm trying to avoid, because I know whatever I find inside, I'll actually be able to be with, whether it's hard, good, beautiful or not. And then I think ultimately, as you alluded to, this healing journey is meant to take us beyond ourselves into the interpersonal. It's meant to take us into the collective and the transpersonal. And I think what happens is that when I am connected to my body, it makes it easier for me to be connected to you. I think of how often these ruptures in connection, just on a day-to-day level, happen because what comes up in you actually evokes something in me that I don't want to feel or I don't want to look at, right? Like I think about so many of even the social and racial conversations that we're having about justice, right? If you are telling me about your pain and all of a sudden I feel guilt or I feel sadness or I feel shame or I feel my own anger, I feel whatever, and I don't want to be with that, I'm going to try to shut you up, right? But that's actually not because you're saying anything bad. That's because I don't know how to be with the intensity of those feelings in me. And so I think that our ability to feel in our bodies allows us to be with other people as they are in theirs. And then there's this other kind of magical, mystical thing that I started to happen for me. And I'll just put this on the table in case it's of interest to anyone, knowing that this might not be where people want to go or where they're at. But when I slow down and feel in my body, I start to notice things like, oh, it feels better. Oh, it feels better to be outside. Oh, my neck hurts when I'm looking down at my phone all the time. Right. Oh, I'm going to go up. Oh, I actually noticed the spark when I looked in your eye and I saw the spark in your eye. And oh my goodness, wow. Now that I'm outside and I'm not just with my head down all the time, I'm noticing that the tulips are blooming and the daffodils are out, and whoa, that color is so beautiful. And wow, this earth is doing something. And wow, maybe I actually kind of want to take care of this little piece of earth that I'm connected to. And wow, it tells me something about rhythms in my body and rhythms around us and how all of us are being held by the same piece of land. And wow, actually we're all really connected, aren't we? And maybe the same thing that's alive in that flower and the earth is alive in me and in you. And I think it takes us ultimately into a kind of like oneness experience if we take it to its logical conclusion. But again, maybe it's just enough to say, I'm going to try to feel my anger and that's what I'm going to try to do. And I'll worry about oneness consciousness later.
Well, no, I think that's a beautiful sentiment. And I think that deserves another episode.
Yeah.
Really, it does. But having said all that, it kind of is a perfect lead into your new book coming out, which is Practices for Embodied Living.
Yeah.
Give us, as we kind of wind down here, but give us the why did you write this book?
Yeah, there's a problem with writing a book about embodiment in that it's by its very nature extremely cerebral, right? I'm trying to explain the importance of being a body in a way that takes people out of their bodies, I assume. I mean, ultimately, the aim of my book, The Wisdom of Your Body, would be that people will go, oh, I've got the buy-in. I really do need to stay connected to my body. And there's a good reason why my body is doing everything that's, happening. But what I wanted to do is take that conversation further and say, okay, here are some things for you to do and try and experiments that help you get to know yourself again as a body, right? If you are thinking, okay, I've got the buy-in, if I have the sense that this is a good thing to turn towards my body, to bring my attention into my sensing self, okay, I'm bought in that that's important, but what do I do next?
Mm-hmm.
It's meant to be a series of invitations and prompts and experiences that create opportunities for you to meet yourself again.
Oh.
Kind of like, I don't know if you've heard of the 40 questions to fall in love that researcher came up with. I'm imagining it having a similar effect of like, okay, if someone gives me a starting place about the questions to ask and the experiences to have, then it will allow me to see the goodness that's really there and to get to know myself more.
Wow. And that's coming out in 2024. Love to have you back.
Oh, thank you.
To talk about that book and probably before then. Hillary, you're incredible. You just have this a beautiful, like I said, beautiful way of articulating this very important, necessary, intense information that we all need to live in this crazy world.
Yes.
But my God, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Oh, well, first, before I share that, I'm just wanting to really appreciate you naming that. That feels so encouraging to me. To thank you for the invitation and for reflecting that back to me. Best way probably to get in touch with the work that I'm doing would be on my website, HillaryLMcBride.com. On social media, I've got a Twitter and Instagram going, Hillary L. McBride or Hillary Leanna McBride, depending on which one you're on. So you can find me there. I've got events posted usually, things that I'm going to be speaking about, talking about, and new resources coming out.
Awesome. All right. We'll have that linked up at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Hillary, again, thank you.
Thank you.
Good to have you back.
It's such a joy to be with you.
All right. Take care.
Take care.